Hey everyone, welcome back to Pine Hollow Auto Diagnostics. Today, just a quick tip. We're working on a 2005 GMC Yukon with, you guessed it, rusty brake lines. And I already replaced the front like 2 years ago, and I told them the rear are gonna go soon, and sure enough, they did. Now it's back for rear brake lines, and there are 2 rear brake lines. Usually, these trucks just have one brake line going from the ABS unit to the rear axle, but this thing is fancy. It has traction control, stability control, whatever. And it has 2 brake lines going from the ABS unit to the rear wheels. Now the question is, how do we tell which one is which? The right wheel and the left wheel. Meaning, you can't just visually trace these lines. So up here, we have 2 lines, and here they're obviously, one is going to the right wheel. See the brake hose is coming down. That one's going to the right. This one's going to the left. If you follow the brake hoses, up here, this line is going to the right wheel, and the other line is going to the left. So on the frame rail, here's where they blew. You can see all the brake fluid everywhere. The one that's lower down on the frame rail, that goes to the right wheel. The one that's higher goes to the left. But then these lines go up above the frame rail. They're hidden behind the gas tank, and the only place you can access them right here is at the ABS unit. And it's these 2 holes on the right side, this one and the one in the corner. So without visually tracing the brake lines, how do you know which one goes to the right, which one goes to the left? You can't really mix these up. I mean, you shouldn't mix these up because they're wheel specific. If you cross the right and the left, you're going to have issues. So here's a little trick that you can use that will quickly identify which line goes where. So I have an air hose, a pressure regulator, and a bicycle pump hose that conveniently can clip onto the line that I cut right here. So we know this lower line goes to the right rear wheel. So we're going to put air in here, low pressure air. So we're going to dial it up to, like, I don't know, 10 psi or something. You can hear it going into the brake line. And yes, to keep this thing open, I was too lazy to get a rubber band, I just used a wrench. So that's just letting air through into the hose and into the brake line. Now as we put air into the brake line, it'll actually pressurize that line, and on the other side, by the ABS unit, we'll see where the air comes out. And if we're pressurizing the line for the right rear wheel, and we see which one the air is coming out of up there, we'll know for certain that line, that hole in the ABS unit goes to the right rear wheel. So I'm just going to show you that real quick. So the air is flowing. We come up here. You can actually hear it hissing. So you put your finger over it. There it is. See the bubbles? So that line goes to the right rear wheel, and that goes to this upper right hole. So you know 100% that's where the OEM line went. So when you route your new brake lines, with I'm going to use this nickel copper corrosion resistant stuff, Easy Bend. We're going to go from here, not behind the gas tank. We're actually going to go, let's see, probably on this side of the gas tank. Route it nicely so it's easy to do, and right back to the hose, because routing it up on top of the frame rail is going to be a huge pain, and that's not going to happen. But anyways, just thought I'd share that quick tip on how to trace your brake line without visually tracing it. A little bonus footage here. How do you salvage these connectors? Meaning the flare nuts. See, way up there on top of the frame rail, excuse my lighting, but there is you know, the hose comes up, and then there's a flare nut that holds the line into the hose. How do you get that out, and how do you reuse that fitting? Because you can use new fittings, but usually these are very salvageable, and the OEM ones are guaranteed to fit. So what we're going to do is try to hold the camera up here. So first thing, if you can cut it close to the nut, because you want to get a 6-point socket right on that flare nut to avoid stripping it. In this case, I'm just going to try to break the brake line by bending it back and forth. Hopefully it'll snap right off at the nut. The rustier the better. Oh man, that thing was on its last leg at that point too. So now we need to get a 6-point socket on there. Last night I did spray these down with some Crude oil, some penetrating oil, to hopefully facilitate removal. We might as well actually cut this other brake line, break it off, so we have better access room to both fittings up there. Okay, so I got the left nut out. Came out pretty nicely. And we're gonna go for the right one. So 14mm socket on a long extender bar. Go right in here, and the nut is rusty, so the socket won't fit right away. You kind of need to jiggle and wiggle and work it on there. And you'll know when it sits on there. There you go. Ready. Now we'll put a nice long ratchet on there. This guy in. Alright, now we're ready to crack it loose. Now last night I did spray these down with Crude oil, so hopefully this one will be friendly and not bad at all. That's sweet. So now just once it starts, it'll come out easy. You can even take your ratchet off and just put your extender bar back in and spin her out by hand. Or not. That's a little tighter than I thought it was. Whoa! Okay. Alright. So now, there we go. So our little flare nut is stuck in the socket. Sometimes they come out, sometimes they don't. And now what we have is a rusty piece of brake line fused into the, inside this flare nut. How do you salvage this? I prefer to, it's actually pretty easy, I'll show you on the bench. The OEM connectors I usually reuse unless they're completely gone. This one actually looks to be in pretty decent shape. So let's come over to the bench and clean her up and get it ready for the new brake line. So first thing you want to do, clamp this guy in a vise and do a nice clean cut with an angle grinder, just to make sure the surface is nice and clean and square. Because if you use the side cutters to cut it off right here, it'll be pinched and you don't really want that. Again, make sure to wear safety glasses. This only takes a second. That's all you got to do. Cut it flush with the end of the nut. Now flip it right side up. Clamp it again. And depending on what diameter your brake lines are, these are 1/4 inch, so 1/4 inch drill bit, Go right on top and just drill it. You see that? The tip of the brake line came right out on the drill bit, and that's it. And then just kind of clean up the brake nut, and you're done. That's all you gotta do. Now this guy is ready for the new brake line. You know, put it on, flare it, tighten it up, good as new. You can also put it on the wire wheel here, just to clean up the threads a little bit. It's always a good idea to start with fresh, clean threads. Again, you should probably use some pliers to hold this, but quick and dirty. There you go. Lube that up. Perfect. So, thanks for joining me for the quick tips. Good luck with your brake lines. I know this won't be useful to people in Arizona and, I don't know, all those dry states, but in the Northeast, this is very applicable, especially to these Chevy trucks that brake lines only last about 7 years. Well, this one made it 10 years. So we got our new lines installed, and now all we have to do is fill up the reservoir, hook up our air line, adjust the pressure to, I don't know, like 10 psi, pressurize the system, open a bleeder, sit back and relax, and watch the magic. So this side's already done. See the fluid coming out? So we'll just come under here, tighten this guy down, and repeat on the second side. And we don't need to do the front since the front brake lines are not disturbed, and this method bleeds the entire system from the master cylinder to the ABS pump all the way clear back. So that's the way to finish off a brake job line, brake line job. That's the way to finish up a brake line job, and the easy way. Alright, one last tip. When rerouting brake lines, and if you can't use the original, plastic clips, maybe they broke off, maybe you totally rerouted the lines for easier access, you have to prevent them from rubbing on sharp metal edges, especially these easy bend lines. They'll rub right through, so you have to route them really carefully. And the trick is, get some vacuum line, 1/4 inch in diameter, and just cut it with scissors right down the side, so it kind of looks like a just a piece of rubber cut right down the side, and like a 1 or 1.5 inch piece. And then you take these and some zip ties and go all the way from, from the master cylinder right up here. I'll show you the new line routing. So we come up here. Here's our first attachment point. You can see one of the lines has a rubber, little rubber piece on it, and then the zip tie just ties it to the frame so nothing's rubbing on metal to metal contact. Then we come here, bend around, make sure they don't touch anything like the drive shaft. They're well out of the way. And here's our second attachment point. Again, a little rubber piece, and that's securely fastened right to the frame piece right here. That looks good. And then they follow the side of the gas tank right behind the cover. Come up here, third point right there, and then they're pretty solid and out of the way right to our brake hoses. So they bend around and attach right here. So out of the way, not rubbing on anything, and that way you can be proud of your new brake lines, and they should outlast this truck. No problems at all. So, hope you enjoyed the little tips and tricks, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.